Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this very important webinar called What Every Insurance Agent Needs to Know About the 2025 TCPA Rule Changes. I invited Andrew Filar to do this presentation because I can't think of anybody else who would do a better job on this topic. For those who are unfamiliar with Andrew, Andrew has been in the business for a long time. He has built his current agency from zero to over 40 million in premium in just about 5 years. And it wasn't a lot of acquisition. Six. All right.
We'll do six. Yeah.
We'll be humble, but we'll also flex when needed. So over 40 million in about 6 years. And it wasn't because he bought a lot of books, but he grew a lot of that through internet leads. And there were other forms of client acquisition as well. And for those who are not using Andrew's leads, Next Call Club, you're missing out. We buy a lot of leads from Andrew, and I know the leads that you're selling to other agents, you're also using as well in your agency, but the game is changing here very soon. And today, what Andrew's going to do is talk about what is the big deal with the TCPA changes, and then also how can agents prepare for the changes. And you're going to speak about not just for the big agents who are buying a lot of leads, but agents who are just starting off with internet leads. And then also, how is this going to affect agents who don't buy any internet leads? There's a lot to cover. If you have a question for Andrew, put it in the chat. We'll address those here as we go. Andrew, if you want to take over the screen share on your end, that'd be great. And as you do that, I'm going to just tell everybody now that there's going to be a 3-question survey at the very end of this webinar that I ask that everybody takes. We're doing this webinar at no cost. This does take time to prepare and coordinate. All that we ask for in return is that you take this brief survey to help us improve. We'll include the link in the chat now and then also at the end. Andrew, you can take it away.
Awesome. I'll take over from here. Thanks so much for the great intro. Thanks for having me as always. Always love coming on and talking to the Insurance Sales Lab community. So I will be working to keep this under 40 minutes today. I want to leave a lot of time for Q&A. And what I will say is that sometimes there's a ton of questions around TCPA. Sometimes there's not. And so it really just depends. But I think part of the problem that we have with TCPA changes today is that I think we all kind of have a general understanding of how the TCPA changes affect us, but not a great understanding. So I'm going to try to make that simpler for you today. And so I'm going to just run right to this caution flag, okay? Before I get started, before I do anything else, I want to just say this is not legal advice, okay? I am not a TCPA attorney. I have a TCPA attorney. I'll put their information at the end of this presentation. I don't necessarily think that you need a TCPA attorney, right? But what I would just say is if there's ever a TCPA problem or a violation or a fine or a complaint, I am not an attorney. What I am going to share today is my understanding of TCPA as a fellow agent, as a lead partner, but I still use an attorney when I have questions early and often in the process. Whenever I'm launching a new product or whenever I have a concern or whenever I'm trying to do something new, I say, how do I stay compliant? So this is not legal advice, okay? So why listen to me? Some of y'all know my background, some of you don't, but like Vlad said, I grew to 40 million in 6 years, and we did that primarily with outbound calling on internet leads. And so TCPA is not a new thing, right? The TCPA Act has been around since the 90s. They've made changes periodically over the last couple decades, and the last major change came in the early 2010s. And I remember when those changes happened, I went into like full-blown panic mode and I said, oh my goodness, like this is my whole strategy to get new business is all about outbound calling. Like I'm in trouble. But as I educated myself more, I said, okay, like it's not dead, it's not dying. There's a way to stay compliant. And so I worked very hard on that over the last 10 years at Allstate. Again, I've been an agent for 6, but I've been with Allstate for about 10. And I started my internet lead journey in 2013, right? So I've been at this for a while. In 9 years at Allstate, it's 10 now, right? But I made this slide a few months ago, there's been well over 10 million phone calls made at Allstate from the team that is producing, okay? And then in the last year alone, Next Call Club offers a telemarketing service. We've made well over 3 million calls in the last 12 months. And so call it 13 million calls. We've not had a single TCPA complaint yet. No pure violation from the TCPA Act has come across our desk, right? We've had people shout at us. We've had people say this, that, right? But we were able to come back to our systems, our processes, and say, nope, we're actually in compliance here. Like, we don't have a problem here because here's how we can prove that we were in compliance here. So what I want to do is help you guys do the same thing. So as you go into next year, you can feel confident that if you're buying leads or calling lists or making any type of outbound dials, that you can stay compliant with the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, also known as TCPA. Okay. So my goal is to make it easy. We'll have time for Q&A at the end, but I'm going to move relatively quickly to try and make sure that we get through it. I can always go back. We can always touch on these things more. So why should you care about the TCPA? Well, for one, unlike other types of civil or criminal charges, just because you have a corporation does not mean that you are insulated from TCPA charges. So if something happens to your business, a lot of times a corporation can insulate you personally from being held liable. TCPA charges are completely different. If there is a fine and your business cannot pay for it, they will come after you personally. Doesn't happen every time, but it has happened and it will continue to happen as negligence and incompetence and errors around TCPA happen. So you can be held personally liable. It's one of the very few examples in the United States where that is true. Second, it puts your carrier relationship at risk. I personally know Allstate agents, farmers agents, and State Farm agents that have had their contract pulled because either they were committing TCPA violations or they were working with a sketchy vendor who was committing TCPA violations that turned into a lawsuit for the carrier. If a carrier gets a lawsuit because of you, 90% chance they're going to pull your contract. We're not here building businesses to get our contract pulled. We're building our businesses ideally to build a lifetime for our families or to sell this asset down the line. Every single call or text, they are seen as exactly the same thing in the eyes of the TCPA Act, is that each one can be a $500 fine. So if you make 3,000 phone calls per day and every single one of those is out of compliance, that can very quickly become a massive amount of money, right? So when you see these class action lawsuits, how they're getting to 10, 20, $50 million is because they're finding thousands of phone calls, okay? So something to note is that there are literal TCPA bounty hunters out there. Like when I go to YouTube, right, maybe my search results are different than yours because there are different algorithms out there. But if you type in TCPA, the first result that I get, I'm curious what you would get, is how to make money using the TCPA Act, right? Robocallers, you can make money off of them. So there's bounty hunters and there's tons of views. Tons of people have seen this video, right? So here are just a few headlines of why this is a problem, right? Like you can see Allstate and other insurers, Choice Health, NPR had a podcast called How to Sue a Telemarketing Company. And it's definitely a clickbaity title. I've listened to this. And what they're doing is they're interviewing a guy who literally is a TCPA bounty hunter, right? He's talking about why he feels justified to do that. And so you've got to be diligent, right? Or work with a lead partner like ourselves who scrub for known plaintiffs, who check to make sure phone numbers haven't changed, who check to make sure they're not on national do not call lists, right? So be careful. I don't want this to come across as like you should be terrified. My goal is not to terrify you or make anybody fearful. My goal is to educate you so you walk away from this conversation feeling less uncertain or less fearful than you did before. So let's talk about leads a little bit, right? So if we talk about leads, we tend to run into 4 different buckets, right? You can call on lists, you can call on age leads, you can call on shared leads. That last one should say exclusive, right? I've shared this slide before on one of Vlad's webinars, and I've talked a little bit about the different close rates between them, but I put this back into this presentation because what's going to happen is we're going to move more towards an exclusive lead in the short run. And so I'll tell you why that happens, right? But some lead providers are saying we're going to what's called a single seller model, meaning they are only going to sell that lead one time because their interpretation of one-to-one consent means it can only go to one seller. Other people say that one-to-one consent, and this is my belief, but of course, I don't dictate this. Really, the carriers like Allstate, Farmers, State Farm, Geico, Progressive are dictating what the lead providers do because they're going to drive the market. Is one-to-one is they are selecting who they want to hear from. So if there's more leads that are going to exclusive, right, you might see better performance, but you're going to see less volume at the same time. So this is where we're at today, right? People kind of know TCPA, they've heard of lawsuits, and third-party consent is allowed to be sold. The last bullet point is the most important thing. Third-party consent is how leads work today. What that means is a consumer is giving the lead publisher, the person who owns the form that's getting filled out, permission to sell their information and then be contacted, right? And usually the disclosure language says, by lead company, their partners, their affiliates, and their partners and their affiliates, right? And so goes this chain all the way down the line. And that's how one person filling out a form can end up with 20 different people having the lead, right? If you don't have the right providers doing the right things, this is how we get low quality leads in the ecosystem. So big picture, these changes should be a good thing. It should be a good thing for the consumer, should be a good thing for the agent, for your producers, because what it should mean is that consumers are more open to hearing from you because they've selected to work with you. They're not getting they're not getting harassed by tons and tons of people just spamming them, robocalling them, texting them, right? This is not meant to hurt the small business owner who's doing the right thing. It's meant to go after the large national call centers that are spamming people every single day. Okay. So let's take a visualization of what the process about a lead generation looks like today. And this is a simplification of that process, but say we've got Susan, and Susan is on the internet, and maybe she went out to Google and said, cheap car insurance in Wyoming, or maybe she saw an ad on Facebook, or maybe she was reading what she thought was a news article about insurance, but it was actually an ad that was just kind of disguised as a news article, and she clicks on the thing and it goes to the form, which puts all information into this form, and it goes into this black box, and it's what we call blind select today, right? Susan is going to give her information to the lead provider, and then Susan has no idea who's going to get that information. So let's say that you got Drake from State Farm, you got Mayhem, and you got the professor here, and they all want to buy this lead. Well, the lead company is going to sell it to all three of them because they have the right to do that under the laws today. Okay. So what's important to remember here is that Susan is one consumer, but she has three leads. Okay. One consumer, three leads. And there's no problem, from an agent perspective, right? I think about this. I don't buy exclusive leads for my agency. I buy shared leads because I feel confident in our sales process. And I also think consumer choice is a good thing. I feel confident that we'll get to the lead quickly and that my salespeople are strong enough to sell enough value to get the sale. Right? The consumer is going to want choice. We want choice as consumers too, but we don't want to be harassed, right? So this is how this works today. Here's the future state. Okay. So this is when the effect was released. It was about a year ago. We're about, 3 or 4 weeks off of a 1-year anniversary of this, right? And it sent shockwaves through the lead generation industry, right? If we want to have like a dramatic headline, but basically consent is now 1-to-1. Some people interpret that, like I said, as, hey, it can only be sold one time. Other people like myself, again, I'm not an attorney, interpret that as, the consumer has to select who it is. Next Call Club does not generate leads ourselves. We buy leads on your behalf from major companies, and everybody that we're working with is moving to either one of these two versions, either single seller or where the consumer has to select the company. We feel confident that both of these are going to be inbounds and compliant. Okay. And this is really, really important. The language is what defines what we can and cannot do with that lead. Okay. So the company, we've already talked about this, right? If you're a farmer's agent and you want to call this lead, that consumer needs to agree to be called by farmers. No longer can they say, I'm just agreed to be called, and then farmers or Allstate or State Farm or an independent buys that lead. They have to say, I'm willing to be called by farmers. So if you are a captive agent, I think sometimes people say, man, like there's downside in being a captive. Well, of course, everything has pros and everything has cons, right? One of the benefits of being a captive agent is that you have so much brand equity under these large national carrier brands like Farmers, State Farm, Allstate. They do not have to go to Vlad Cherchenko Insurance. They don't have to go to Andrew Filar Insurance. They can select Farmers or Allstate, and that is okay. If you are an independent agent, you might have to do more work on branding your agency. So I run as Peachy Insurance, and sometimes I generate leads as Peachy Insurance. Sometimes my partners will show up Peachy Insurance, and that works. So think about, if you're an independent agent, think about your brand and how you can improve that brand so people want to click on your brand, okay? If you're a captive agent, you don't have to worry about it being your individual brand. The entity is fine. The next thing we need to make sure in the language is the contact method. So if it says, look, you can call, you can text, you might get pre-recorded or AI generated voice, that's all okay. But if it's only to call and text, but it doesn't say anything about pre-recorded or AI generated voice, you cannot use pre-recorded or AI generated voice, or you are out of compliance and subject to fines and violations. Okay. And the last thing is products and services. And this is not as big of a piece to worry about, but I want to share one example. I was talking to an agent a couple weeks ago, And they actually had a really great strategy, and I loved it. I thought it was very scrappy, but it creates some potential challenges next year. They were buying Medicare leads outside of open enrollment, and they were buying them for a very, very cheap price. And they were buying those leads and saying, look, I'm just going to call them and offer them home and auto insurance. And then when open enrollment comes back around, I'm going to call them back for Medicare. That will no longer be okay unless it says auto and home insurance included in that disclosure language. So just be careful, right? If you call them for home and auto insurance and then through that conversation you pivot to Medicare, I think you're probably okay. But if you're buying a Medicare lead that they've opted in to get Medicare and you're then calling for home and auto insurance, you're probably in a pretty clear violation. So again, I am not exact on that language, but I would be very careful buying, a different vertical lead and offering something else without offering the direct thing that they're shopping for. So this is important too, right? Now, Susan, same number of consumers. Susan's still shopping, but depending on what Susan chooses, maybe she's not 3 leads anymore. Maybe she's 1 or 2. Maybe she's 5, right? But I'm guessing that people aren't going to select 5 or 7 or 8 people to call them. It's probably going to be 1 or 2, maybe 3. So what does that look like? Here's a visualization of that, all right? Susan says, you know what? Not a big fan of Drake. Don't like his music, and he's got a lot of bad PR. I'm going to say no, thank you. Allstate screwed my mom on her house, right? I don't want to talk to her. Cool. You know what? But the professor, I like him. Let's do it, right? So I use these examples, right? Because everybody's called, and farmer screwed me, or Allstate screwed me, or State Farm screwed me, right? And there's always these people. We should avoid that moving forward, because if they don't want to talk to farmers or they don't want to talk to Allstate, they're probably not going to select farmers or Allstate, right? So that's what I'm talking about, is that the intent should be a little bit better. The consumer experience should be better. The producer experience should be better. So very important. Early tests show a drop in volume from 40 to 60%. I do not expect that drop to hold long term. The people who run these ads, who monetize these forms, are so scientific, they are so intelligent that they are testing a green get a quote button versus a blue get a quote button. They're A/B testing everything. So early drops show 40 to 60% in lead volume is dropping 40 to 60%. I imagine that number will reduce very quickly. It might, if it's at 40, it might go to 30 to 20, and then it might settle in maybe around 20% drop, right? But just a thing to know is that early tests show a significant drop in volume, and the changes are going to start around December 10th. So be ready. If you're making a year-end push right now, be ready for lead volume to drop in the short run. Doesn't mean that it 100% will. It will be very regional and state specific. If you are in a large population state without a lot of big lead buyers, you're probably going to be okay. If you are in a low population state with a lot of great agents, I would use Colorado as an example. If you're in Colorado, you're probably going to need to expect to pay more money per lead because there's going to be a lot of competition for that lead. So if you don't buy leads, though, you still need to pay attention. And here's why. If the lead price goes up, agents are going to say, I can't pay $12 for a lead, or I can't pay $9 for a lead. I'm paying $5 now or $7 now. I can't pay double that. So what are they going to do? The agent is going to say, well, let me do something different. Maybe they're going to go out and buy some mail. Maybe they're going to buy some live calls. Maybe they're going to do Google ads. Maybe they're going to do Facebook ads. Maybe they're going to do more partnerships, right? So as people substitute away from internet leads, they'll go into these other things, which will increase competition in the other areas. It is not happening in a silo. We live in an interconnected world. Things are very complex. Something happens over here, something else is going to happen over here as a result. Okay. So if you're not doing leads, you still need to pay attention and be ready to have a lot more people mailing into mailboxes, a lot more people bidding on those calls or those AdWords. Okay. So the pros and cons, just like anything, there's going to be pros and cons to these changes, right? There should be a better consumer experience. Hopefully it's a better, easier job for our LSPs, and the consumer, it has a higher intent. But the cons are that we're going to have to be more diligent to stay compliant. Lower supply, just basic supply and demand, right? Supply goes down, demand stays the same, price is going to go up in the short run, okay? As the price goes up, people are going to say, I'm not willing to pay that. So demand will come down, which means the price will come down. That means that in the short run, price will spike a lot, come down over time, and probably sit somewhere in the middle of the short-term price increase and where we are today. So I think in the short run, lead providers are trying to tell their customers to brace for a double, like the cost to double, to be double the price. In the medium to long run, it should be about 30 to 50% more expensive. That is my understanding. If lead volume drops 40%, they're going to need to raise their price by 80% to make up that revenue. It is an asymmetric relationship. Okay. So just keep that in mind. Be ready for it. Don't let it come as a surprise. So this is extremely important, is we've got to understand the definitions on how TCPA works. And what I want to talk about is what's called regulated technology. These changes affect regulated technology. And so let's talk through that a little bit. So mostly what it's talking about is an auto dialer, which is referred to as an ATDS. And so a lot of people will say to me, well, I don't use an auto dialer. I use click to call, or I use a predictive dialer, or I use a power dialer, or I use a parallel dialer. And there's all these different names for it. And that's great. I that's awesome. But the legal definition of an auto dialer is not the same definition as you might think it is. And so there was a Supreme Court case against Facebook that defined what an auto dialer was. And what that says is it's a phone system, any phone system that has the ability to create, store, and dial randomly sequenced numbers. Okay, so any of those three things. It says and, but it really is or. I should have, that's a little bit of a typo. So even if you don't use that functionality, it is still an ATDS. And so I'll give an example of this. I use Five9, and Five9 has ATDS capabilities. And so even if I don't use those capabilities, it is considered an ATDS. But Five9 has another product called manual touch mode, which does not have that capability at all. And so I use the manual touch mode to make sure that it is not considered an ATDS. It's a click to call system, but it is proven to not have auto dialing solutions. Okay. So whether you use auto dialing or not, if the system has the capability, it can be considered an ATDS. Okay. The second thing is what is defined as a robocall. This is really important because there's some really cool technology out there that makes our lives a lot easier. Pre-recorded or AI generated voice are considered robocalls. So if you use a voicemail drop or you've recorded it and you hit the beep and you hit the button and it drops the voicemail, so it's the same exact voicemail every time, saves you a lot of time, that is pre-recorded voice. If you do not have consent in the disclosure language for that, you are out of compliance. AI generated voice. If you're using outbound calls on AI generated voice and you do not have that in the disclosure language, you are out of compliance. You can use AI generated voice or pre-recorded voice as long as it is in the disclosure language and you have consent to use it. Okay. So voicemail drop, that's regulated. Ringless voicemail, that's regulated. AI generated calls, that's regulated. You can use these things, but you need to have the right disclosure. Okay. Do not call is also really important. There is both a national database and then there's an internal database. So I'm confident, I don't know this for sure, but I'm confident Farmers has their own DNC list, right? So the national list might have 1,000 people in it, but the Farmers list might have 2,000 people in it because they've said, hey, don't call me Farmers, but they haven't put themselves on the national list, right? So what I would always say is always use the internal scrub tools because they're going to be stricter than the national tool. If you don't have a carrier tool, then use a DNC scrub tool. If you don't have one, Next Call Club offers one. We can do that for you. Okay. So DNC for phone, DNC for text. Let's just ignore this because those rules are changing. So it used to be that if somebody said, don't call me, you can no longer text them. But if somebody said, don't text me, you could still call. That is true today, but that will be changing early next year, probably in March or April. So let's talk about common danger zones. Like I said, only you can avoid TCPA violations in your agency. Okay. So here's some things. If you're using a non-vetted vendor, some random person hits you up, they've got an @gmail.com email address and they can sell you leads or calls, like, buyer beware. Do they have a website? Do they have a legit email? Do they have testimonials from other agents who will use them? Right? Are there people out there having success? And so make sure you're not working with sketchy people. There's all types of things that are always popping up. So I can get you calls for $20 or $25, but if you don't have confidence in how that call was created, you might be in a little bit of a problem. Okay. The next one is aged leads and bulk leads, right? So the challenge here is if you're going to buy like an aged lead or you're going to buy like what people call bulk leads or lists, you need to run them through the scrub tool because let's just give an example of this. Say you buy a lead that's 7 days old and let's say Vlad bought that lead, when it was brand new and they said, Vlad, I don't want to be called by farmers anymore. And Vlad said, all right, no problem. Puts them on the do not call list, puts them in the farmers do not call list. Well, then you buy that lead 7 days later. You don't check against that list and you call them, you've got a violation. Vlad's fine because Vlad did the right thing, but you've got a violation. So if you're going to buy age leads or bulk leads, make sure you're scrubbing them. A lot of people don't. You've got to scrub. Otherwise, you're putting yourself at a lot of risk. Okay. Duplicate leads are another big problem. If you don't have duplicate management in your CRM, I've seen people get TCPA violations because of duplicate leads. They buy a lead, it goes out there, they call it, they get them on the phone, they say, don't call me anymore. I say, no problem. 3 days later, that person goes out and shops again on a different website. You buy that lead again. But it's not the same lead company. It's not the same form. They've got the consumer has shopped again. It's a new lead, but it's that same consumer that has told you not to call them. And then all your text automation fires off and your call automation fires off and you think you're good, but they've told you not to call them. That's a potential issue. Could you fight that in court? You probably could, but would it be worth the money? Probably not. So be careful. Last one is multiple CRMs. We do telemarketing with Next Call Club. And sometimes people will say, well, can you deliver the leads to my CRM and then you guys call them in the other CRM? And I always say, no, I won't do that. The only way I'll do that is if I have a good relationship with the customer and I know for a fact they're not calling them on their own. Because if I call in one CRM and they say, don't call me, and then you call in the other CRM right behind it, and those CRMs are not connected, you've got a violation. So these are the common danger zones that I see. Okay. So one of the things I'd say is just like read the consent language of your providers. If you're buying from a company, go to their website and go through the get a quote form. Just read their disclosure language. Like this is a legitimate big name lead company right here. You can see right here, it says our marketing and remarketing up to 8 insurance companies or their affiliates. So sometimes one of those 8 people is an affiliate who then sells that lead 5 or 6 more times, right? And so that's how we got into this mess. And that's what this law is trying to avoid. So read the consent language of your providers. Any leads that you get through Next Call Club, because we're going out and buying them from the major ones, we can pass this consent language into your CRM if you want it. So you have it every single time. The other thing we can do is we can diversify our marketing, okay? I don't do direct mail, but I know a lot of agents do amazing with direct mail, okay? I'm not patient enough for it. It doesn't happen fast enough for me. And that's a me problem. It's not a mail problem. It's a me problem. But direct mail can be a great way to diversify. Direct inbounds is what I'm going to be doing a lot with my own agency. I will continue to buy leads. I will continue to telemarket. But if volume is not there, I will substitute into direct inbounds. That is a consumer initiated call. That is somebody saying, I want to talk to an agent. Maybe they're hitting a Google ad. Maybe they're calling a 1-800 number. Maybe they're hitting something on a piece of direct mail that you didn't send out yourself. It is a consumer who is ready to buy. It's kind of like a call-in. And then SEO, make sure you have a good digital presence. If somebody Googles your agency, what do they see? Make yourself easy to find. Like I love Deion Sanders. Some people love him. Some people hate him. He's very loud, but he means it when he says it. He's like, I'm not hard to find. You want to come play for me? I'm not hard to find. Be like Deion in the sense that you can't be hard to find. Okay. You don't have to be as loud as him. You have to be as obnoxious as him, but be easy to find. And what I would say is don't wait, start now because it's happening fast. Okay. So the other thing we can do is make sure that if we're calling down lists, we're calling age leads, win backs, monolines, make sure you have good list hygiene. Okay. This is something that we offer. We will now call lists for agents. We have a new product coming out. And we require you to run through the do not call tool, the reassign number database, and a tool that allows us to identify landlines versus mobile numbers, because the way you dial a landline is different than how you can dial a mobile phone. There are no regulations on dialing landlines, but there are regulations on dialing mobile phones. We can scrub these for you. We can clean your list up. We can do all these things. So if the key here, okay, and this thing at the bottom is very, very key. If you do not have one-to-one opt-in, you can still reach out, but you've got to make sure you scrub against the do not call list. And then the manual or the dialing or the text must be manual. That doesn't mean that you have to pull this thing up and punch it in, but the technology you use must be considered a non-ATDS or a non-auto dialer. There are tools out there. I'll share them in a minute. So let me just talk about some best practices, okay? These are just like 6 tips, best practices. All right. The first one is create a compliance policy in your agency. Make sure that you've got something documented. How are do not call requests supposed to be handled? Do you have that documented? Does everybody know it inside and out? Does everybody know how many times to call. Does everybody understand how you handle these situations? So have a compliance policy, document it, and train on it. Because if you ever do have a problem, you get a lot of grace if you can prove that you took a earnest attempt to be compliant. They're not out here trying to knock people down for making a small mistake. They're trying to go after the people who are being negligent and know they're being negligent, right? So to have a way to cover your tail. Next is use a CRM that has duplicate management. There's a lot of CRMs out there. There's tons of them. I could probably name 10 of them off. But if it doesn't have duplicate management, ask them if they have it on their roadmap, or consider changing to a CRM that does have duplicate management. And what we do in our system is, what we basically do is we say, if we've gotten this phone number in the last 30 days, that flags. And then we have somebody go through and double check, right, to see what's going on. It's a little bit manual. It's a little bit inefficient, but it keeps us safe. And with the amount of phone calls we make, it's worth it. Third is read your lead agreement. So people sign agreements with their lead providers. As somebody who does lead buying for agents, the amount of people who sign our agreement in like 1 minute shows me that like they're not reading it, right? We have mutual indemnification in there. And what that means is, it doesn't mean that we agree to pay for all of your legal costs, but what it does mean is that we're going to share information if there's ever a problem. We share it with you, you share it with us. So every single lead agreement should have this. Oh, sometimes they don't have them right away. You can ask for it. A lot of times they'll put it in. Fourth is stick to the 90-day rule. If you get opt-in for a lead, don't call it for more than 90 days. If you do call it for more than 90 days, at that 90-day mark, scrub it through your DNC tools. Some people interpret the opt-in rule as 12 months. Some people are now interpreting it as 30 days. I interpret it, and most people interpret it as 90 days. That can change, right? But as of right now, 90 days is the good rule of thumb. Fifth is always scrub against the DNC and reassigned number database. I'm not going to talk more about that. But six is really, really important. Have a compliant call cadence. I can share my call cadence. I think I shared it on a previous webinar we did, Vlad. But like, don't be an asshole, right? Think about yourself as a consumer. This is so important. How would you let me just rephrase. Some agents have told me, oh, I have a 60% contact rate. I'm like, that's amazing. How do you do that? And what they say to me is, they say, well, I call them 10 times the first day. And I say, okay. Or they say, well, I call them twice in a row. And that's what I call the double tap. If I call you, you don't pick up, and then I immediately call you again, yeah, you might get a pickup, but it might not be a good experience. Personally, as a consumer, if somebody double rings me, I expect there to be an emergency. If it's a person who's giving me a sales call, they're getting blocked, right? I have boundaries. I'm willing to enforce those boundaries. I think a lot of people do. If somebody calls me 10 times in one day, somebody better be dying, because I promise you, your time is not more important than my time, right? This is how I think as a consumer. So I think sometimes as insurance agents or salespeople, we think about like, what do I need to get the result that I want, rather than thinking about what's the right way to do this so I can get what I need, but the consumer doesn't have a bad experience, right? So put yourself in the shoes of the consumer and treat people like you want to be treated, and it's okay to ebb and flow on that a little bit. Like, we call 3 times the first day. Some people call way more than that. We call 3 times. Some states have a rule that you can't call more than 3 times in 24 hours. There are state level TCPA laws that are stricter than the national laws. So be careful. There's a lot of nuance here. Don't call people and don't harass people, right? We can be efficient, call people, and treat people the way that we want to be treated. Okay. So this is really, really important, right? These changes affect calls and texts with regulated technology. I've said it a couple times. I'm saying it again, right? If you do not have opt-in, you need to manually dial and text after scrubbing. If there's an existing business relationship in force, these do not apply. So if you have somebody who has home with you, but not auto insurance with you, or home and auto, but not Medicare, you have an existing business relationship and you call to review that policy, and then within that review, you offer another product and service, you're good. Right? If you just call to solicit them, you might be towing the line a little bit. But existing business relationships help keep you exempt from some of these rules. Most of the time, though, there's not enough things to make all of our calls on existing business relationships. All right. So I want to show this graphic. It's a nifty little tool. Okay. Safe Select is one of these solutions. I'm not using it personally, but I thought they had a really great graphic, right? So they basically said, if we focus on the left side of this graph, it says, are you a lead buyer or seller? Let's just say we're a buyer, okay? And it says, are you the one-to-one named party consent? Yes. And you're like, okay, I was. And was express consent captured? Great. use whatever dialer you want. Awesome. But if you didn't get one-to-one consent, you need to use a manual dialing solution. So it's just like a little flow chart of how these things work. Okay. Um, I'll send this out, Vlad, in like the post webinar email that I usually do, but I'll share this graphic as well. So let's wrap this up. What can we do? We can educate ourselves, right? It's the last kind of tip that I have is Reach is a lead buyer trade organization. So it is a place that is trying to influence change, trying to lobby the laws, right? Reach has done a lot of work lobbying the FCC to make some of these changes less strict. When these rolled out in December, they were a lot more strict than what we're going to get, right? And they will continue to lobby. I do not think, I get asked this question a lot, not going to get into politics. People said, well, maybe with the new administration coming in, the TCPA rules will get thrown out. Not going to happen. Spam calls, robocalls are a bipartisan issue. Do not bank on that at all. Okay. I think everybody hates spam calls. Everybody hates robocalls. Just expect that this is going to happen. What we can do is we can work together to lobby to get these rules changed. TCPA World is a website. It's tcpaworld.com. There's probably updates every day, maybe every other day on the TCPA changes. It's a little in the weeds, but some people get really interested in this stuff. My attorney is the Troutman Amin firm. They run this website, put a lot of free information out there. Okay. So how you can use Next Call Club to stay compliant. Our leads will all be ready to have one-to-one consent by the time January 27th rolls around. Some of our stuff is already one-to-one. Most of it will happen in early December. We will have technology that proves that we have opt-in and one-to-one consent. We offer telemarketing both for internet leads and your lists. We will have a little bit of a waiting list, but we have telemarketing for both your lists and your leads. And then we also offer those direct inbound calls. So we can push a consumer who's firing in, who wants to talk to an agent today. And then we offer data analytics where we take your data, visualize it, give you insights, and help you out. So thank you for your time. I think I did a good job leaving 20 minutes for Q&A. We can go longer if we need to, but happy to answer any and all questions as time permits.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Andrew. We have quite a few questions that we're going to address. If you want to get in touch with Andrew, there's going to be a QR code on the screen, but we're also going to send out a replay of this webinar along with Andrew's contact information so that you can get in touch with him, his Next Call Club lead provider. But then also, Andrew has a newsletter where he sends out regularly newsletters where he talks about what he's doing in his agency to grow. And for this particular webinar, my one ask is that everybody takes 2 minutes and answers 3 questions in the survey that I just posted in the chat. Andrew, in no particular order, I'm going to take some questions here and rapid fire. Number 1, with texting rule changes, specifically sending out SMS text messages, what's changing with that specifically?
So remember, texts and phone calls are seen as the same exact thing in the eyes of this law. So keep that in mind. If you have opt-in, right? If you have one-to-one consent and opt-in, a text and a call is fine, assuming the language has that in there. Almost every single piece of language for these lead forms is going to have call and text in there, right? So just as like a good rule of thumb, if you have one-to-one consent, you're good to call and text. But remember that a call and a text is considered the same thing. So if you live in a state where you can only contact them 3 times in 24 hours, Florida is one of those states. You can only call or text 3 times in those 24 hours. That does not mean you can call 3 times and text 3 times. A call and a text is seen as the same thing. So as a good rule of thumb, if you have one-to-one consent, you're good. If you don't have one-to-one consent, you need to manually text them. It can't be automated.
Okay, very good. How does this affect requote campaigns? People that we, previously spoke with, say 6 months ago, and they said, yeah, give me a call in 6 months if you have a better rate. Or people that maybe we didn't get in contact with 6 months ago, but we know their renewal is coming up. How does that get impacted?
Yeah, if you want to be safe, what you need to do is you need to take that list, scrub it through the do not call tool, and then use a manual dialing solution. I know that can be frustrating because sometimes when you scrub it through the do not call tool, your list goes from like 1,000 records to 400 records. And I know that's frustrating. But what's more frustrating is getting a lawsuit or having a problem to deal with, right? So what I would say there is there's kind of 2 ways to think about it. Is if you don't have an explicit opt-in, pull down the list, scrub it through your tool, and use a manual dialing solution, whether that's like a non-ATDS click to call, or you're physically punching in the number or physically punching in the text. Okay. Like something I've even talked about, like with my own team, is like maybe I'll go hire a couple interns to do manual texting. You know what? Like I'm just going to set them up on a computer and they'll just manually text, and that'll be their whole job, right? Is to manually text. Because to me, is that efficient? Absolutely not. But it keeps me safe. The other thing to think about is uh like I'm an Allstate agent and I have to use a texting solution that is provided to us. I cannot go outside that. I am out of compliance if I go outside of that. But one of the benefits of that is that when we send somebody a text through it, they have to, it's a double opt-in. So they have to click yes to opt in. But once they're opted in, we're good. And so if you use an opt-in rather than an opt-out, that is another way to protect us, right? So if you have automated text set up and a lead comes in, and instead of just saying, hey, we have a quote available for you, it says, hey, press yes to accept this quote. That is an opt-in. And then you can text them 6 to 12 months later until they opt out. There's trade-offs on that, right? It's more compliant to do it that way. But as we all know, the response rate is going to be significantly lower. If we send 100 texts and they have to opt out, well, we know that all 100 of those people are getting the message. If they have to opt in, maybe only 20% of them opt in and get our message, right? So it's a trade-off we got to go through together.
Okay. And when it comes to scrubbing leads through the do not call list, specifically the X dates or the requotes, how often do you recommend scrubbing that? And what's the best way to do it in an automated way so that we don't manually export the leads every day, import them to a DNC scrubber, and then upload them into our system? What's the most efficient way to scrub through DNC contacts?
The most efficient way would be is if you have a CRM that has either the DNC tool built into it or you have an API connection into it. I know that might sound like I'm speaking French to some people, right? I don't think that you need to scrub every day. Generally speaking, if somebody says, I want to be put on the do not call list, there's a 30-day window to honor that, right? If somebody says, put me on your do not call list, and they say it directly to you, put them on your do not call list. Like, don't wait. Just do it right then and there. Like sometimes people revoke consent on a lead and we forward an email saying, hey, this person's revoked consent, mark them do not call. You have a window there because it's got to be reasonable. So my rule of thumb is if you're going to pull a list down to call it, scrub it every 30 days. If you want to be safe, scrub it every 15 days. It doesn't need to be a daily thing, but if it is going to be a daily thing, consider having a CRM where you can use an API or a webhook to check against that in real time so you're not doing it manually. And I know that sounds complicated, but I can, if somebody shoots me an email,
Andrew, we
I'll
can
give
do a
more.
video, a step-by-step video tutorial on how to do that. That's
right. Perfect.
Not too difficult. We can send this
Perfect.
out to everybody who's on this call. Okay. A lot of different questions coming in on different topics. Let's move on to robocalling, pre-recorded voicemails. So there's going to be two questions here. One with Ricochet. I know Ricochet is a system that you've used, I use, and for Allstate agents, there's a new version of Ricochet, completely different code. And then for non-Allstate agents, there's also another version created. Can you speak to that?
I can. So look, if you're an Allstate agent, and again, I'm not Allstate, I'm not speaking on behalf of Allstate, I'm not speaking on behalf of Ricochet or an Allstate agent. My understanding is that it is now tapped into the Allstate do not call tool, right? So if it's on the Allstate do not call list, it'll say, hey, before you dial, it'll pop and say, before you dial this, like you've got to make sure that you've got consent, right? And so if you're an Allstate agent and you're on the new compliant tool, you should be good. I doubt that Allstate would have said okay if it was not outside. Allstate, Farmers, State Farm, Progressive, all the major carriers are very conservative when it comes to these things. I would feel pretty confident if I was an Allstate agent using it moving forward. Again, not legal advice, not speaking on behalf of the carrier, an agent, or Ricochet. If you're not an Allstate agent and you don't have this new functionality, I can't really speak to it, right? So a lot of Next Call Club clients use Ricochet, and you have human interaction between each call. So it might not be what's called like an ATDS, but maybe it is. It's very hard to tell within the code. And so what Ricochet is doing, and I know the owners of Ricochet, and we've talked, is that they are searching for one-to-one consent, right? They are looking for proof of one-to-one consent to make sure that not only are we worrying about the technology side, but they're also saying, let's have consent too. And so it's a conversation that you have to have with them, and I can't answer it directly for non-Allstate people because I
Yep.
don't know the answer. I don't want to say something just to sound smart and have something. Like, that is where there's a lot of gray area. Like with these ATDS versus non-ATDS, there's a lot of gray area there. And so that's why all the lead companies are just moving to the one-to-one consent model, right? Because people say, why don't people just use a non-ATDS and just we keep all the leads the same? Well, because for the lead companies, they can't control how we dial or what technology we use. They have to take our word for it. And if we get a bunch of TCPA lawsuits, they're going to go after the lead company too. So they're just doing what they can control on their end to get one-to-one consent moving forward. So Ricochet, I think probably okay, but don't take that as like 100% okay. You've got to do your due diligence there.
I talked to them earlier this week, and
Yeah.
the guys who run the company, and
Yeah.
for non-Allstate agents, there is going to be a completely different version of Ricochet, and it's totally compliance. It's a different code. Everything about it is going to be different than the current version.
Perfect.
So to me, who uses Ricochet, and I have a big team,
Yeah.
he walked me through exactly what that's going to look like. And I'll just say this, that it would still be worth having a system like Ricochet. The efficiency will still be built
For
in.
sure.
It just won't be the normal auto dialer that we're used to today.
And by the way, I actually think that it's slowing down. This is my opinion. I think it's slowing down is probably actually a good thing, because I think
100%
it
agree.
will reduce spam risk. And so I
Yeah,
think you'll still be able to make significantly more calls than you would be on another system, but slowing it down will help with spam risk quite a bit.
exactly. And the way that he described it, I haven't seen it yet, but they're migrating people over here very soon. Is before you contact a lead, their information will appear on the screen, and it'll tell you everything about when the lead came in, all the contact information, any notes that you might have put in for that person. And then if it's more than 30 days out from the day that it came in, it'll give you a warning signal. If it's more than 90 days out, it'll give you a warning signal. So there's going to be a lot of compliance built in, and the system won't just call the next lead. You have to manually call it, which I love. Any more control that we have over who is going to be contacted next, I like. Let's see, a few other questions that came up here I want to address, but before that, and also if you guys have a specific question, put it in the chat. Andrew, tell me if you see something that I miss, but I'll just give you my quick take on this whole change. If there's two main concerns here, is that the cost of leads is going to go up, say it's going to double.
Yep.
It's one issue. Our marketing expense is going to go up. And the second issue is that our volume is no longer going to be there. So if you're used to buying 50 leads a day for your staff, getting 50 leads moving forward may not be as easy. So here's my solution for agents to consider. One, when it comes to making sure that your cost per acquisition stays the same as what it is right now, you have to increase your close rate. So if you're currently closing 3% of the leads that you buy, now you have to close 6% if your cost of the lead doubles, and you'll still stay at the same cost per acquisition. Now, how do you double your close rate? Well, there's a lot of things to consider. For one, innately, a lot of these leads are going to be higher quality, higher intent. So that'll help. Just that alone will possibly help you double your close rates. Two, buying less leads for a lot of sales organization, just that alone is going to help you increase your close rate because you're going to be touching the same lead more times. So that'll also help. Secondly, or third, the speed to lead concept is really important. But once you have the lead on the phone, what you say, the quality of your conversation, you have to manage that with your team. You can't just be sloppy on the phone and win on price. Next, if you don't close someone today, you have to have a really good follow-up process on the next day, the day after. You can't have any slippage with follow-ups. Another thing that you can do to increase your close rates is if someone opts in to get if you buy an internet lead, you can send them an email, right? Most of these disclosures will give you the permission to send them an email. Well, maybe instead of just a generic email of, hello, this is Vlad Cherchenko, we can help you with your insurance needs. Here's our number, give us a call. Maybe there's a video that is included in every email where it shows the personality of your agency and it shows an angle of you that maybe no one else sees. And you're humanizing your agency. So it's the combination of a lot of these little things that can amount to a double or maybe an even higher increase in your close rates. So I think for a lot of agents, this will be a really positive change, and for myself included, where it's going to force us to not be sloppy with the leads that we buy, but be more intentional with what we do with every lead once it comes in. So that's the increase in cost portion. Now, how do we deal with volume? If we're getting less leads after this change, if previously I was buying 50 leads a day from Andrew, well, here's a consideration. I'm a big proponent of buying homeowner leads. So people who already live in a home and they're buying a home, they're looking for home insurance first. Maybe what I need to do is open up my thinking and buy auto leads. And not just single family home leads, but also mobile home leads. So buying auto leads might be a requirement for a lot of agents who buy leads. Another thing to consider is if you're working with one or two lead vendors and all the other lead vendors you've dismissed because you've had a bad experience with them, well, consider maybe reaching out to them again. And hopefully you didn't ruin the relationship when you exited that relationship the first time around, where you're going to have to work with 5, 6 lead vendors as opposed to just 1 or 2. So volume will be fixed by 2 things. One, working with more vendors, and also buying the non-traditional leads that you're used to purchasing. So those are just some considerations as far as continuing to grow through internet leads as the prominent source of acquiring new clients. But that aside, please.
Vlad, yeah, I love those, man. Those are such good actionable tips. I think I want to emphasize your point about segments. You might like opening up different segments. Like one thing that I'm adding for my agency is single car homeowners, right? And I don't love single car because I'd rather get a multi-car homeowner. But I know that for me, the value is a lot of times the most of what's driving retention, growth, cash flow is the homeowner's policy. So if I can't get more homeowners leads, maybe it's a multi-car auto or a single car homeowner versus a multi-car renter, right? So some people are chasing auto, maybe you go for a multi-car renter. Some people are chasing home, maybe you go for a single car homeowner. So I think that's a really, really great piece of advice that I'm already putting in place in my own agency. The only other thing I would add, because I thought you added so many good points about making your leads count. The only thing I would add is that having this mentality with your sales teams, I think, Vlad, you do such a good job of helping agents close more on the first call. Something that I want people to pay more attention to as well is how to overcome objections to get the quote. So I know you talk about that a lot in Insurance Sales Lab, but you've got to have this mentality that if somebody picks up the phone, unless they're saying I'm not who's on this lead, they've got to get a quote. Because when I talk to agents, sometimes they'll be like, oh man, I got the leads, they're not working. And I say, well, if you just quoted more of them with from your quote to close is really good, but your quote rate is poor. And then you look and they see they're getting 10 pickups on leads and only 2 quotes. One of the fastest ways to increase your production is turning those 10 pickups from 2 quotes to 7 quotes or 6 quotes. So that's just something I wanted to add on that. Your tips are really actionable and really great.
Yeah, and I'll throw out a few more, but just on that topic, Andrew, quick role play. You're the prospect, I'm the sales agent. Here's a recipe for reducing the number of people you quote. Hello, is this Andrew?
This is Andrew.
Hey, Andrew, this is Vlad calling you from ABC Insurance. How are you?
I'm good, man. What can I do for you, Vlad?
Hey, I saw you requested an insurance quote, or not even saying insurance. I saw you requested a quote for 123 Main Street.
Yeah, I was poking around on the internet. What do you got for me?
Okay, so you're gracious right there by actually responding with something positive. So this is an example of terrible. Me just calling and saying, hey, Andrew, I see you requested a quote for 123 Main Street. A quote for what? And there was no question in there. I just gave you a statement. So let's compare that to, hey, is this Andrew?
This is Andrew.
Hey, Andrew, this is Vlad calling you from ABC Insurance. How are you?
I'm good, man. What do you got for me?
I see you requested an home insurance quote or homeowner's insurance quote for your home on 123 Main Street. Do you currently live in that house, or are you in the process of buying it?
Oh, I'm actually in the process of buying it.
Right. So the response there now is an answer to a question that I asked. So when you're calling internet leads, whether it's home leads or auto leads, start with a question, a very pointed question. Okay. So there's I cannot emphasize enough how important that is, because just that alone of asking a question can increase the number of quote opportunities you have. Okay, moving on. One other additional strategy that could be implemented is the clients that are calling in, if they have just home or just an auto lead and a service person on your team answers the call, a lot of people, Andrew, your agency might be different, but my service staff, selling is not their thing. That's not what they love to do. But what they can do is create a sales opportunity for someone in the sales team and say, hey, Andrew, I see you have your home insurance, but you don't have auto insurance with us. If you'd like, we can email you the quote for an auto insurance quote, just so you know what that would cost. Is 123andrew@gmail.com your best email?
Yes, it is.
Okay, we'll send you the quote there, but let me set you up with Mike from our team who can go over the exact vehicles to make sure that you get all the discounts that you qualify for. So if you have someone on the service team that is not comfortable with quoting, or that's not their strong suits, they'll come up with every reason why not to quote someone, then maybe give them a permission to just set up opportunities for the sales team. And then over time, they're going to build that confidence, and they'll be able to go from not just asking to quote them, but they're actually going to go to the quote themselves. So that's with existing clients. And then two last points is that you can also make proactive outbound calls to people with one line of business. So if you have a lot of people who have just auto insurance or just home insurance, those are people that you can reach out to and cross-sell another line of business. And final points, referrals. I don't know about you, Andrew, but are going to become a huge part of our business, more
Paramount.
than anything
Paramount.
else. Because our sales team, they know that if they don't get a referral from a client, there's going to be a transfer coming in from an SDR in the next few minutes they can take. So it forces sales agents to optimize for the path of least resistance. They're just going to wait for the next transfer to come in. There's no hard incentive to get a referral. So some things that we're implementing in our agency, and take it or leave it, but we're considering having an adjustment in the way that we train our staff, where to get credit for a sale, not only do you have to ask for a referral initially, but then you also have to reach out to them once they're onboarded the next day or a couple of days later and ask for the referral again. Just double check on, hey, how did the onboarding go yesterday with Susie? And hey, just double check, and have you been able to talk to so-and-so about giving me a call to get an insurance quote? So unless that follow-up happens, maybe there's no commission paid out for that sale. That way there's some alignments between our priorities, which is to grow through referrals, and also with our sales team to make sure that they also are prioritizing asking for referrals. What are your thoughts on that specifically?
My head's in the exact same place, Vlad. So to give an example of that, we've been preaching referrals all year, right? We started last year really pushing them. So we sold about 400,000 in premium off of referrals in 2023. We're trending to end the year at about $1 million in premium sold off of referrals in 2024. And we're not even asking that consistently. And so something that I just implemented, I have a buddy who used to work in one of the corporate call centers, and he was talking to me about how they hold the reps and call centers to the adherence of the scorecard. And so I took that idea and I said, look, I am going to hire somebody to listen to calls, right? We're going to randomly pull 15 to 20 calls a month per rep on the service side. And we want them to do 4 things. And one of those 4 things is asking for a referral. We've been doing it for like a month now, and the service team is driving a ton of referrals to the sales team. Next year, we're going to do something similar. We are going to have somebody listen to every single call that is a close to make sure they asked for a referral. If they don't, right, there will be a stick. There will be a stick if they don't ask for a referral. I don't know that we'll take away credit for the sale, but there will be some type of stick. But we're also going to reward them. If they sell that referral, they will get extra commission on top of it, right? So it will be a massive focus for us in 2025 as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I know your compensation plan is going to evolve. So is mine. We haven't really set the exact rules on how we're going to adjust this. Couple of questions here on calling a business versus personal lines. These TCPA rules are for opt-in leads. Now, if you're calling, with 2 questions here. One, just you're doing a outbound call campaign to say call Allstate leads. These are not people who opted in to get an insurance quote, but you run it through a DNC list. They are not on the DNC list. You're making an outbound call. are there any adjustments to the rules with calling those people with TCPA January 27th, 2025?
So generally speaking, no adjustments. Okay. So typically businesses are exempt from TCPA rules, right? So if you're calling a business, you are generally pretty wide open to go for it, right? Where it gets a little bit murky is when you have kind of like a small business or like a one or two man show that use a cell phone number, like their personal cell phone number as their business line. That's where you might get into a little bit of a gray area. Generally speaking, though, calling commercial is going to be pretty wide open. It's mostly calling consumers that these new laws are really focused on.
Okay.
It's basically it's mobile phones, right? So if you're calling a business landline, like you're always going to be fine. If you're calling a business mobile phone, well, it's like, is that the personal phone or is that the business phone? Are they the same thing? You know, maybe you win, maybe you get sued, maybe you win that lawsuit, but it's a pain and it costs money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Now, what about whole X-Date leads? Are you familiar with a company where you can just buy lists of names and numbers? You scrub them through
Yes.
the. What about
Yep.
those people, the non-opt-in leads?
Yeah, if you scrub them through the DNC tool, if you're calling a consumer, right? If you're calling a consumer's X date, scrub them through the DNC tool and then use a manual dialing solution, whether that's physically dialing manually or using like a click to call that's a manual dialing solution. If you're calling a business, you're a lot safer. I'll just put it that way.
Okay, got it. If you could have agents take one key thing away from this webinar, what do you want that key takeaway to be, Andrew?
I would say the main key takeaway is just be cognizant of the automations in your agency. Automations are amazing. I love automations. I encourage people to do as much automation in their agency as they can, but make sure you're cognizant in auditing those automations to make sure that these automations are not conflicting with each other and creating problems for you, right? So that is like my one big tip, but I'll also just say is like, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine, right? Like costs might go up in the short run, but performance should go up too, right? Volume might go down, but performance should go up. In the long run, we're going to end in a much better place. It's going to be okay, right? Ask for help early and often. There's a lot of people like yourself, like myself, a lot of other people out there trying to spread the good word and help other agents. So it's going to be okay and probably a good thing. That's the main takeaway.
Yeah. And for me, this is not a time to panic, but this is a time to plan. And
Correct.
for agents who have predominantly grown their books of businesses purely from internet leads, I think you're going to come out of this much better as a result of these changes. And something that I'll just run by this group. We still have a few hundred people on this call. This is something, and I didn't run this by Andrew before saying this, but we've been talking over the last 6 months. Andrew's extremely busy with running his businesses, as am I with our staff. And that is our priorities, making sure that our agencies are taken care of. But we love sharing best practices. This is why we're doing this with you guys. We're considering maybe next year doing a conference, an in-person conference for agents to come together and go over growth practices on what's working in our agencies. We'll invite the top performing agents, not people who used to be agents 20 years ago, 10 years ago, but agents who are actively in the game right now. And we're going to go over not just how to grow your agency from internet leads, but also how do you take the clients that you have and you multi-line them, sell commercial, sell life, specialty, other lines of business, how to get more business from referrals. If this is something that you're interested in participating in, let us know in the chats. Is this something that you would pay for to come to a different city to spend a couple of days with us and learn some of these strategies? If so, let us know and we'll consider doing that for you guys next year. And in the meantime, we're going to continue to come out with helpful content. I do business management trainings once a month where we share best practices of what's working in our agency. And we do that at no cost. If you want to get the recording of those sessions, you have to be a member of Insurance Sales Lab, of course. And we have all of our past recordings uploaded in there. But for agents who want to get more referrals, for agents who want to multi-line their book of business, those are going to be hot topics that we're going to be focusing on in December and January as the TCPA rules are changing. With that said, Andrew, thank you for hopping on the call today. Any parting words before we part ways?
No, what I would just say is like, ask, reach out. I'm happy to chat. It's me and my business partners love working with other agents. We're agents ourselves. And so, if you need help with any of the things that we offer, leads, live calls, telemarketing, data analytics, like let us know. We'd love to talk with you and see if it's a fit. But we want to continue to add value just like Vlad wants to continue to add value. So we will continue to work to add value in whatever ways that we can. So thanks for your time, attention, and energy.
Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.